Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. As part of a comprehensive analysis, today we'll be discussing 6 very interesting articles out of the Hindu newspaper. But before we begin, good morning to all of you. As always, we have brought in these initiatives back and I hope that you are engaging with them as much as possible. But something very, very important, which is on 24 December, which is tomorrow, Sunday. Tomorrow we start our Prelims test series, or PTS as we call it. And this PTS, first 3 tests are totally free. We would like you to engage with it. You will get a proper report card which will tell you what is your strength, what is your weakness. You will generally have an idea how to go forward with regards to that. And there are total 30 tests over the next 1 to 2 months. The cost is 5,000 rupees once you give in the first 3. So you can engage with it. If you like it, if you can see the questions are representative of the pattern, you can then further do the sectional tests also. And this is the link is given in the description and you can just register. You can give it in both offline and online mode on any of our centers in offline. Online it will be available through the Byjus Exam Prep app. So I hope that you will on Sunday, which is tomorrow, for sure give mocks, because mocks are very, very important. First test is polity plus history plus the current affairs of the past 3 months. And therefore you can get a proper understanding of polity, history, and the next test is thereafter geography and economics, and the next test is environment and science and technology and other miscellaneous topics. So 3 tests to check your preparation. I hope you will engage with that. Thereafter, one more important thing which you would have seen again in the description box, which is that if you want one-to-one counseling, which is any form of question you have, anything you want to engage with, the UPSC aspirant has a lot of different questions. Over your journey, you can need guidance and we are there for that. So you can just fill the Google form link which is given in the description box, and thereafter you can engage with anything and everything with the counselor one-to-one. This is not a group discussion, it's one-to-one counseling, and we will call you and we will be happy to solve any of your issues when it comes to that. So do fill up the form because it will be important for you. So first, important, the test is starting. First 3 tests totally free. Don't have to do anything, just have to download the app or go to the center and you can engage with it. Second is the fact that we have one-to-one counseling. You can fill the Google form. It will help you generally constructively in your preparation. With this, we can talk about the 6 topics we cover. First is basically a report card on the Israel and Palestine issue. What is the progress here? It's been 10 weeks of the onslaught. On October 7th, we saw the attack on Israel by the Hamas. What is the report card for that? Thereafter, this is a very important topic for GS paper 1, which is basically related to the Sahitya Academy and how the Sahitya Academy can do much more to push in this digital age literature, which we'll talk about. And then 4 basic but straightforward topics coming from different areas. One scheme, which is called the Palna scheme. Thereafter, China banning something, which is quite big. That was because Chinese get banned everywhere. Thereafter, a one-stop solution for health insurance. And last but not the least, related to the first topic itself, first and last are related to each other, is the Gaza, what we call as the aid which was being stopped, and the UN resolution on it. And what we are seeing is that there's a watered down resolution with a very interesting caveat, a very interesting condition. So with this, let's talk about the first topic. As always, we'll talk about the basics first, then we'll go into the nitty-gritty, which is the details, and then we'll summarize and move forward. Now, when we talk about Israel-Palestine, we know the history of this. We've been following this for now close to 3 months. Over and above that, this is a topic which has been developing and static. It's basically become static in a way when it comes to Israel and Palestine generally. And over and above that, with Hamas attacking on October 7th, I remember, and we have been engaging with this topic for the past 3 months in different contexts. So I'm not going to go into the history of it because that is something which should be totally in your mind by this point of time. From the basic idea of what we call as Jerusalem, the idea of the Jews being what is called scientific anti-Semitism of Hitler, which in turn led to a reaction from the Jews which came up with the idea of Israel itself, to the two-nation solution, to the way the British and the Americans have also destabilized this, to the Abrahamic records and accords itself. That's a separate issue altogether. The fact is, Israel-Palestine is a very big issue between the Jews and the Muslims, and the Palestinian sector, which started with close to 80% of the Israeli sector, has now become only 3 to 5% of it, with the Gaza Strip and the West Bank being the two basic areas. As I said, the Jews' anti-Semitism is already built into Christianity because of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ itself, and therefore that anti-Semitic concept was representing itself in social distancing or even social discrimination of the Jews throughout the ancient and medieval period. But Hitler came up with a very, very dangerous solution, which was the extermination of Jews, and he created the other with regards to the Aryan concept, which is again a distortion of the linguistic concept of Aryans into a racial concept. And scientific anti-Semitism as produced by Hitler was about that the Jewish personality has certain traits which are inherent to them, and therefore they need to be removed. They are the problem in Germany itself, and the concentration camps, therefore the 60 lakh to 6 million Jews dying throughout the European sector is again a very well documented thing which we do in world history. And generally we know that after that there is this reaction from the Jews in which they wanted their homeland back, and therein comes the idea of Israel, and Israel being the country of light, the country of the Jews, an area where they can control their own fate. And that was at the cost of the Palestinians who were already in that sector. And with the expansion, the most interesting word which you need to know here is that the Israelis that ways created a certain security order. This is a point we discussed previously also. This security order which they created, which is in West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, the fact is that they created a certain security order in which they could control the movement of the Palestinians, and in a way, most of the West Bank is now also occupied by the Israeli population, and it's a concept of the Israelis occupying Palestine, and that's a standard issue. Now, there have been multiple responses to this, from democratic to aggressive and extremist in that regard, and Hamas is a product of that struggle, wherein the Palestinians don't really actually subscribe to the Hamas ideology, but the Hamas organization argues that it represents the Palestinians, and therefore they are fighting for the liberation of Palestine from Israeli concept itself. Now the point was, this is not a new thing, but why did Hamas do October 7th is because of the fact that there was a new peace or an artificial peace which was being developed by the Americans in this sector, with the Saudis and the Iranians, the UAE and the Iranians, and this whole Qatari sector, this whole sector going into certain type of what we call as internal understanding. Hamas wanted to shake the tree, and they shook it by basically attacking Israel, and therefore puncturing their idea that they are invincible. And the very well sold and very well talked about Iron Dome was undercut by the rocket attacks of the Hamas, by overwhelming the system itself. So again, you should know this already, but I've given you the basic idea that yes, Israel has a certain narrative here, and Hamas has a certain narrative here. Now even Hezbollah, the Lebanese and the Jordan authorities are also involved in this. The fact of the matter remains is that Israel started a certain project after October 7th with certain objectives. Now, in the process of what they've been doing since the last 10 weeks, 20,000 Palestinians are dead, 50,000 have been either wounded, or close to 90% of its population has been displaced. The United Nations recently said that Palestine has become a graveyard for children and a living hell for whoever is there. And therefore, the 10-week attack, this 10-week what we call as military attack, has been very systematic, has been very proper. Now, what were the objectives? Now, this is basically, this discussion is about the report card. This is what you can be expected in the examination as an answer, wherein they're asking you what is the outcome out of this. What is the outcome? That is a very important point. Now, there were 3 objectives with which Israel went after the Palestinian sector, went after the Hamas. The first one was to free the close to 240 hostages which had been taken hostage by the Hamas terrorists in that regard. Second was to dismantle the Hamas infrastructure and institutions in the Gaza Strip. And third was to create a deterrence for 7th October not to happen, as they call it, their 9/11 movement in that regard. Now, these are the three basic objectives with which they started. We will free the hostages, we will dismantle the Hamas, and we will act, or we will create a deterrence. There was a proper invasion in which they asked 1 million people to move from north of the Gaza Strip towards the south. They have cut food, water, electricity and fuel. And in the process of doing all of this, a very big, very big hospital called the Al-Shifa Hospital. This hospital was attacked by the Israelis, saying that this was basically the headquarters of the two very important leaders of the Hamas itself. The Hamas has been using what we call as secret tunnels, which they had been developing for the past 10 to 15 years in the Gaza Strip and West Bank itself. And now the question is, these were the three objectives with which this 10-week attack was started. Now the point is, what is the outcome? What is the outcome? Have they achieved what they started with? And what is the Israeli narrative here? What is the Israeli narrative here? The fact is that when it comes to hostages, they were only able to free one hostage themselves, and rather killed 3 of the hostages by mistake, Israelis. Then there was a ceasefire for which 100 hostages were exchanged between the Israelis and the Hamas itself. So, which means that still close to 100 plus are with the Hamas, which is a problematic aspect. And in no way, when we talk about this article, we in a way justify what Hamas is doing. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and these Palestinian people are not represented by Hamas. But Hamas is playing a game here, which is much bigger than what we understand. So, ceasefire, 101 themselves, 101 taken, still close to 100 plus with the Hamas. Second was that they wanted to dismantle Hamas institutions. The two very important leaders whose names I'll give you, which are not important to you but are in the article itself, as we said, basic idea. They still walk free. They said that they're dead man walking. They're still walking, however. They're not dead. Even after attacking a proper hospital, which was a major humanitarian cry from the world itself, wherein the only big hospital in Palestine was destroyed. And when it comes to deterrence itself, now this long war which they are fighting is taking a toll on Israel itself. Now, Israel started this battle by creating a certain narrative. And the narrative was that Hamas equals to the IAS, or what we call as the ISIS or the ISIL, which is Hamas equals to the Islamic State which was there in Iraq and Syria, and the narrative was that Hamas equals to ISIS or the IS, which is Islamic State itself, which was a brutal terrorist organization. If you've been following the news for the past 5-6 years, you would know that Syria and Iraq, IS had become, which again American created only in order to destabilize Assad, because came out or basically went out of the control of the Americans itself. The ISIS in that regard was a organization which did represent terrorism. But the ironic aspect here is that the more this war is going forward, this asymmetry is getting actually pointed out. That Hamas is not equal to ISIS. And more than that, what the Israelis are not understanding is ISIS used to kill Muslims. ISIS went after the indigenous population, the Kurds, and that whole Islamic State was created on the dead bodies of their own people. In that sense, there was a very big hatred which was created against the ISIS, wherein everybody knew that it was a terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. However, Hamas, that narrative of Israel creating that Hamas equals to IS is not basically standing fully because of the complexities of West Asia itself. The more the people get killed in Palestine, the more the Hamas is able to argue that the aggressor is not the Hamas but the Israelis itself. And therefore, the complexities of West Asia are now making sure that Hamas is able to change the narrative also. So the problem, what we are trying to understand here, what turns out to be is that 3 objectives they started, none of them have been achieved. And Hamas came prepared this time. They were able to undercut the Iron Dome. They have now also understood that if a long war starts, if it's a very long war for 10 weeks already, if it goes to 20-30 weeks, 300,000 Israelis were taken out of the economy as their what we call as military service and pushed into the army itself in this project. There's uniform conscription in Israel itself. They were taken out, and then now that is taking toll on Israel. The ironic part is Hamas only has rocket launchers. It may have funding of Lebanon. It may have funding of the Arab states itself. Israel has American technology, American guns, American what we call as a state-of-the-art technology. It's a nuclear power. Still, it is not able to do anything with regards to Hamas. So what I'm trying to argue here is that there are 2 basic points which have been made in this article. First, what is the objective with Israel started? 3 objectives. None have been achieved. Further, the way Israel is approaching this is to create a narrative that IS equals to, which is Hamas is a terrorist organization as big as, and the way it used to, it is acting like the ISIS, which is the Islamic State. But again, what is happening is the more Palestinian gets displaced, the more people will basically start to associate themselves with the Hamas itself, because Hamas is fighting for the liberation of Palestine. And therefore, the argument is getting undercut by the actions of Israel itself. And Israel is not understanding that the West Asian politics is not as it was when it came to the Syria and Iraq issue. And therefore, if they wanted to achieve these 3 things, none have been achieved. This is the report card, this is the ground report which I am trying to give you with regards to this. So, this has not been achieved, this has not been achieved, this has not been achieved, and rather they have gone into a long war where Israel is now hurting itself because its economy is going down with people out of the economy itself. War is never good for economy. We already know that, be it First World War, Second World War, or any war, 65, 71, any war, it's not good for an economy. So, in the short term it may be, long term it isn't. Because of the artificial demand rise, it will fall. Thereafter the economy will correct itself, recession. Same thing which happened in the Russia-Ukraine thing. Now recessionary trend can be seen across the world itself. So let's now go into these smaller points. I hope that you understand the basic point of this article. So the 3 objectives with which Israel started was that they wanted to free the 240 hostages, then dismantle the Hamas, and third, which is what was not a declared concept, but create a deterrence that nobody would ever try to do an October 7th on Israel again. Now, if we talk about the progress, 2 leaders, Yahya Sinwar and Mohammad Deif, were the 2 people who were believed as Hamas leaders. They were the targets. None of them have been killed by this point of time. And Israel has only managed to free 1 hostage by its own military strength and shot down 3 hostages by mistake. So that therein they realized that they would never know who is actually the Hamas fighter or the hostages. So then came the ceasefire in which 100 hostages were actually released, and the cost of that was 1 million people moving towards the south of Gaza Strip itself. Thereafter, they targeted the biggest hospital in the Palestinian sector, Al-Shifa Hospital, which was a major humanitarian cry by saying that it is a Hamas command center. But again, Nobody related to the Hamas command or Hamas, what we call as leadership, was killed in this hospital bombing, and therefore this has also been futile, creating even more problems in Palestine, which they are already basically seeing hell on earth in that regard. Now, the narrative with which Israel is basically operating in this war is that Hamas is like the Islamic State, but Israel wants the Hamas to be destroyed as well as the IS, which is Islamic State, was. But the problem is, in the complexities of West Asia, the geopolitics of West Asia, this narrative does not really sweep everybody, because IS was a proper terrorist organization, outgrowth of the Al-Qaeda created by the Americans in a way, and chaos and mayhem was there, and it used to attack Muslims and Muslim armies also, the Kurds, the Syrian forces, the Shias, everybody was killed by the IS. So therefore, there was a standard narrative that IS does not represent the Muslim world in that regard. However, the Hamas is not like that when it comes to their objectives. They came prepared this time, knowing that if they can have a resistance which is long and wherein Benjamin Netanyahu cannot use it for his own self-benefit, if there can be a long war in which Israel's weakness can be shown, which it is showing, and if it is a long war with 3 lakh reservists coming into the army itself, it would start to stress the economy. And that is what is happening. So in a way, Hamas is winning in that sense by creating a certain narrative in that regard. So Israel-Palestine, there's a fundamental contradiction here, because IS or ISIS was seen as a terrorist organization. Here, everybody knows that Israel is sitting on Palestinian territories. That is something which is even recognized by the UN, by the US and the UK. Thereafter, Hamas terrorist outfit organizations also are not fighting for a random cause. They are saying that they are fighting for liberation of Palestine. And therefore, there's a little bit, Hamas started as a political organization. People believe, and there are multiple reports which have come in, that Hamas was actually what we call as armed by the Israelis only, so that they could take Palestine itself. That is a standard thing which happens in politics. There's a lot of argument where Benjamin Netanyahu actually sanctioned it in that regard. So that is something again which standard things which happen in politics in that regard. But the point is, if the war was to eradicate Hamas, free hostages, and create deterrence, the Jewish state of Israel is not even close to meeting any of its targets after 10 weeks of intense bombing in this century. So what is the point of this article? The point of this article is to give you an update. The update is 3 objectives. None of them been achieved in that regard. And generally what we see is that Israel is losing ground in this narrative, and rather the Hamas is getting more and more strengthened, either by international support also, but the fact that the Hamas is able to undercut this ideology that Hamas is not equal to IS, and they are fighting for a greater cause which may or may not be justified. That is not you and me to decide, but it is a terrorist organization at the end of the day, and what they did on October 7th in no way is justified. But Hamas had a basic plan through which they're doing. Israel had this scorched earth policy that we will take everything, we will destroy everything, but they have not been able to. And therein there lies this issue. The more this war goes forward, it is not good for the economy of the world also, because Israel is an exporter of a lot of important things. And the more this war goes forward, like Ukraine and Russia, there's no conclusion till this point, as we know. There's no report is also coming. It's become silent that way. Same way, Israel-Palestine, this issue is now going to simply become silent, and not, the news coverage comes from time to time in this way. But 10 weeks, no real development. After this, we can talk about the second article, small one, which is the idea of what we call as the Sahitya Academy. So if you remember, just on Thursday, we discussed the awards which are given by the Sahitya Academy. In India, 24 languages as recognized by the Sahitya Academy itself is given recognition through multiple awards. And these awards this time were given to 9 books of poems, 6 novels and 5 short stories in different languages. For example, Dogri, Gujarati, Kashmiri, Manipuri, Odia, Punjabi, Rajasthani, Sanskrit, Sindhi, Assamese, Bodo, Bengali, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada and Santhali, and with others also. The fact is, this in itself is a very big achievement which is Sahitya Academy is doing, which is that obviously in a linguistically diverse country like India, to just recognize dialects and languages and texts and recognizing them and giving them certain form of recognition and public presence is actually quite important. In a country where you and me cannot actually bring in public relations PR quite quickly, the fact is that students, universities, colleges are recognizing the craft of writing. Writers are encouraged to write, and therefore these hidden gems of India we are able to identify in English, even too in translations. That way, Sahitya Academy is doing its job in a way. However, if you look at the larger context, Sahitya Academy, when it was established, the National Academy of Letters in 1954, that is the English of Sahitya Academy, it was going to be an institution which was going to promote and take literary activities forward in 24 languages. And Sahitya Academy does give awards, but the coverage across the world is not like, for example, the Booker Prize or the Pulitzer. It's not like that. We know it, you know it because you're preparing for UPSC. Other than that, people don't actually know the writers who are actually writing anything. Over and above that, it is about promotion. I don't think any of us have ever got an ad, promotional letter, or even a notification that some form of workshop, exchange program, discussion has been happening or had happened, or any lecture which has happened about a program which the Sahitya Academy is doing. And therefore, therein comes the question, can Sahitya Academy do more? See, in the digital world, there is already not a lot of incentive to read books. We have this habit of watching videos. We can read the same thing. We'll rather watch a video to see how it works. And we have now everything, you can do it yourself type videos, and if not, unboxing has become a very standard thing, unfortunately. Now, therefore, Sahitya Academy in this digital world is not doing enough to spread the message of literature and the importance of literature. And what is even more problematic is that Sahitya Academy does give Bal Sahitya Award, Yuva Puraskar, the Bhasha Samman, which is translation prize. But unfortunately, this is the first time you would be hearing about it also. And when it comes to the Sahitya Academy website, which should be very proactively developed, which should give the recognition to these people, it is not updated. It has grammatical errors. It does not talk about anything. The publications are either not accessible or are not affordable. The fact is, in the era of screens and readers losing habit of reading, Sahitya Academy, though has been able to recognize people, has not been able to represent India's rich cultural heritage in the form of literature. And therefore, the question is that, and this is a very relevant question for GS Paper 1, and I've given you that type of question in the end also, that in this world of digitization, digital age, is the Sahitya Academy doing enough to push literature forward? And herein you need to have ready-made solutions. Ready-made solutions could be the fact that these books can be added to the school curricula. There can be more recognition wherein, as we give national awards, Sahitya Academy awards should be broadcasted everywhere. Further, these people should be integrated into the college and even higher education syllabuses, and we should have interactions with them. Third is that if we can advertise for everything, we can advertise and talk about reading. Further, we need to inculcate this habit and talk about the problems of using screens too much. So it's about awareness, it's about recognition, it's about how you want to, in a way, give or integrate these books and people into the school syllabus or higher education syllabus. And therefore, if you're talking about a new education policy, this new education policy, Sahitya Academy should make sure that they're able to influence something here. And when it comes to their books, these books should be available very readily. should be distributed at public forums, should also be affordable, and the website should always be updated with all the latest information so that people can actually enjoy these very well written books. India is a land of languages, and if we are a land of languages, and if we are not able to recognize our own languages, our own writers, our poets, we are the land of Kalidasa. We are the culture which produced Rajshekhar, Kalidas, Ravi Kriti, Bhanabhatta. So why can't we actually recognize the Kalidasas of this century, of this country? We are very, 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 very fortunate to have these literates with us. Unfortunately, we don't even have we don't know their faces. They don't get the right type of recognition. That is not just true for literature. Every art and cultural form in India today has a very, very, very dangerous vulnerability, which is that they don't have an audience. People don't care about it. Unfortunately, you have to be pushed and compelled to discuss your own culture. If art and culture was not the part of the syllabus of the UPSC, maybe nobody would have really cared about it. The fact of the matter is, it is your culture. These are our people. And in that regard, we should be recognizing people who really deserve, rather than making random videos on Instagram, these reels which we so like, and we have now made it into a business. We need to recognize true art, true culture, and the real India. That is the fake India which we see there, which is just all copied content, plagiarized content, and doesn't really do anything for India generally. So I hope that this article and generally this discussion can give us a better understanding of that it is our culture which is going to get extinct. India is unity in diversity, a country of multiple cultures and multiple ethnicities, and that is what makes India India. And if we are going to talk about Sahitya Academy in the context of not doing enough, the Ministry of Culture as it is does not have a very big budget, 0.75% of the budget itself. We need to make sure that we as individuals can take it forward. We are very proud Indians, but we should be equally proud to push our own culture forward. With this, we can talk about the Prelims Bytes section. 2 articles we've done. First is very simply the idea that what is the Israel-Palestine and the art and culture issue. Israel-Palestine, nothing really as an outcome. And art and culture, Sahitya Academy not doing enough. 2 questions are there in the end for that. Thereafter, when we talk about Prelims Byte, first is that under the Palna scheme itself, Palna itself means a creche. The Ministry of Women and Child Development is thinking about establishing 17,000 creches in India and giving more employment to Anganwadi workers through that. And the fact is these creches are important because the women's participation in the workforce is only 37%. And only when women know that they have a safe space for their child to develop nutritionally, health-wise and cognitively, they can actually enter the workforce. And therefore this creche scheme is very, very important. Remember, Palna scheme. Thereafter, China has banned the export of rare earth metal technology, which is quite interesting. It is the top producer of rare earth metals, which are very, very important for lithium-ion batteries, EVs and magnets itself. Very, very important that way. And they have argued that this export of technology is deemed to be a problem for their own national security. And this comes in the context of how the Americans, the Europeans are using the same technology to get the rare earth metals they're importing from China and then producing itself in their own countries, which is a loss to China itself. Why am I discussing this? Because this could mean that laptops, devices, cars could become more expensive because there's already a semiconductor issue wherein the supply of semiconductors, the supply of rare earth metals is already very skewed, which in turn could mean that this could have an impact in the long term. Thereafter, the Hindu has argued that the government is exploring that they need to bring a private and government health insurance scheme regulator in one body itself. So they're looking for a health sector regulator which can basically monitor the insurance scheme, both private and governmental, so that it can be more affordable and there's no vulnerability. So the Ministry of Finance is talking about a watchdog which can look at this sector itself. It is important because when it comes to insurance, India should have in that regard 70% coverage. The fact of the matter is, penetration of private insurance is increasing at a fast rate, and with that comes vulnerability. We all know about the scams which are happening. So the government needs to intervene and should intervene in that regard as quickly as possible, and a watchdog is being talked about, another developing story for further. Thereafter, the first topic we discussed, Israel-Palestine, and now we come back full circle in that regard, wherein we are talking about the UN and Gaza. Now the UN Security Council has adopted a resolution on Friday which is about delivering aids to the civilians in Gaza, but the initial resolution said urgent suspension of hostilities between Israel and Hamas. However, this line was dropped by the UN Security Council, which means it's a watered down resolution wherein they have also in a way accepted the fact that this conflict will go on further for very, very long. So rather than watering down, they say it's strong, but the fact is a call for urgent suspension of hostilities to allow safe and unhindered humanitarian access and for urgent steps towards sustainable cessation of hostilities. This line being removed because of the internal politics of the UN Security Council itself tells us that the UN has also accepted that like Israel, like Russia and Ukraine, this is an ongoing conflict which will go on for long in that regard. So before I go to the mains questions, just to remind you that there is a Google form in the description box which is for one-to-one counseling if anybody needs it for UPSC preparation. Generally, it will help you in creating a certain roadmap and will help you for guidance generally. Now we discuss Israel-Gaza and Israel-Palestine in that regard, Israel-Hamas, and how the three basic objectives with which they started did not come through. They have not been able to free all hostages. They have not been able to dismantle Hamas. They have not been able to actually create a deterrence. Long war now hurting Israel. Second, Sahitya Academy not doing enough to spread literature in this age of digitization in that regard. And then four very simple articles. China's ban could be having a long-term impact. The fact that the Palna scheme, we will have more creches, which is quite important, which is daycare centers for women. And thereafter, the fact that the UN itself has accepted that Israel-Hamas is going to go on for long and the UN Security Council has dropped something like this. And last but not the least, the fact that there will be a very quickly, or very soon, a regulator which could be in the insurance sector for both private and public. With this, let's look at the mains questions. Israel's continued engagement in Palestine is increasingly becoming problematic and rudderless. Rudderless means not going in any direction. Comment. Very interesting question. IR question, JS paper 2. Then, in the era of digital media, the Sahitya Academy needs to do more to engage younger generations in reading. This is a real question which can come in GS paper 1 in the context of what is happening in India generally. With this, I would like to end the session. Thank you so much. I will see you soon. I hope that all issues today were discussed comprehensively and you have a better idea about that. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.